So before we actually get into my Dvar Torah, how is that for everyone in terms of the new Siddur? Do we handle it? Are we managing it? It's a little different. The words are a little bit different. But it's kind of like an exercise routine. If you do the exact same exercise the exact same way every time, there's no growth, there's no development. It's only when you shift it up a little bit, you add a little more weight or you change the way you do it, now all of a sudden you start to see some benefit. So it's good for us that we're changing the words a little bit. It's making us think about what we're saying, and it's making us recognize where we are and what we're doing. All right.
So it's just up a few.
Are we good? We find it?
We're close.
Ish?
Yeah, we're getting there.
It's right around there.
It's right over by Book Ocean. It starts on 29, I think.
Let me continue. Vayechi, right?
Yeah, but it's in that paragraph.
Yes?
I know.
I'm just looking for what pasuk.
Vayechi Yaakov? It should be after a break,
It
so.
is. No, it's actually in the middle of a big paragraph.
Yeah, it says,
It's after V'yarbuma Od.
Oh, okay. Oh, the Haftarah is after a break.
It's right here.
It should be close.
It's right here. It's right here. I showed it. Okay. All right, good to go.
All right. So, my friends, what I want to talk about today, there are different ways that we can make the world better, right? And from a Jewish perspective, we talk about it in one of two different words, right? What is the word that we typically think about when we want to make the world a better place? What's the word? Tikkun, right? Tikkun olam. Litaken means to fix, to repair, right? Tikkun is one of the ways that we go out and we actively change the world. We see something that is wrong and we fix it. We see something that is lacking and we add to it. We see something that is too much in a place and we say, hey, let's bring this back. Let's take it. We're actively going out and we're doing that. But what's the other word? And we don't think about it in this way. But what is the other word? Chesed. It could be chesed. It's not the word I was thinking of. Chesed is kindness or mercy, right? In terms of that. Could be. Certainly having chesed in the world makes it better. That's true. Kavod. Kavod is honor, right? Having kavod in the world makes it a better place. That's true. Tzedakah. Tzedakah also makes the world a better place. But there's something I'm looking for that's more direct. We don't think of it in this way, but I think it's important. It starts with the same letter. The hint is it starts with the same letter as tikkun. Tefillah, prayer, maybe. How about teshuvah? Right? We think about teshuvah, we think about repentance, right, as a process that we do come high holy days. It's a process that we do, to make ourselves better, perhaps. But we don't often think about it in terms of making the world better, right? In terms of if we go through this process of teshuvah, what does teshuvah actually mean? Return, right? Lashuv, to return. It is another one of these words that helps to make the world better, if we're thinking about it, right? Teshuvah says the world, something has gone off of its track. It has gone off of the way that it's supposed to be. It's gone off of the right way. We need to bring it back. And it is another active way that we can make the world a better place. And so today, I'm going to do something that we do in the Midrash a lot. Instead of starting from the text and working to what it is that I want to talk about, what the Midrash often does is it starts someplace completely different and winds its way back. And the last thing is, here's the text that we're talking about. So we're going to do it that way. And I want to quote from the Talmud, Masechet Yoma, page 86b. And these are two different quotes from Reish Lakish, a rabbi of the time, about teshuvah, about repentance. Reish Lakish said, great is repentance, great is teshuvah, because through it, deliberate sins are accounted as unintentional. And then there's a proof text for that, which I'm going to skip for the moment. And then he says, the next thing he says is, Reish Lakish also said, great is teshuvah, because through it, deliberate sins are accounted as though they were merits. So Reish Lakish is saying two different things, which, by the way, is problematic because they're a little contradictory, right? The first thing he said is, repentance is so great because through repentance, sins, right, deliberate sins are thought of as being accidental. And the second one is, great is repentance because sins, deliberate sins, are accounted as being merits. So how do we understand these? Because neither of them, frankly, on the surface, make a lot of sense. Right? Maybe the first one we could argue has some logic to it. What is it saying? Great is teshuvah, because through it, our deliberate sins are accounted as accidental ones.
I mean, in reference to the parsha, is that what you're talking about? To the parsha?
Just in general, and then we'll bring it to the parsha.
Oh, so I'm thinking about with the whole parsha, with the brothers and they.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely bring it back to the parsha, but just in general, let's understand what Reish Lakish is saying just in general first, before we apply it to the parsha.
That it can turn out to be something that's worth. I can't do it without talking about the parsha. It can turn out to be something that's actually better, even though like you did this sin and on the surface it seemed like it was really bad. Maybe the outcome.
So maybe the outcome, there's a positive aspect to the outcome, but that still doesn't explain why a deliberate sin would be seen as being accidental. Alex?
When you kind of realize what that does after the fact, you don't intend for the consequences.
So through the process of teshuvah, you come to learn perhaps what those consequences of your sin is, and because of that remorse, because of that it sort of shifts it. Good, I like that. Marge? Good. So you could argue to say, look, I was in a frame of mind that made me do this sin. I did it intentionally, but now I feel bad about it, and I've done this process of teshuvah, right? I've done this process of repentance, and so now that I've really thought about it, I may not have done it intentionally. And it sort of lessens then that punishment, right? Because the consequences in Judaism of an intentional avera, of an intentional violation, are higher than the consequences of an unintentional one, right? If you go out and you eat something that's non-kosher, right, and you do that intentionally, that sin is of more significance than if you thought you were eating an Impossible Burger, but somebody slipped in real meat and you didn't know, right? It wasn't your fault. It's still a problem we'll have to deal with, but it wasn't your fault. Okay. So maybe we can understand Reish Lakish from the first part of it as saying, okay, now that I've gone through this process, my mindset has changed. And therefore, I can argue that the mindset issue of intentional versus unintentional, we can bring it down to a more lenient view. Right? I like that. I like that argument. Okay? Well, now the question is, how do we deal with Reish Lakish's second statement? Because it's one thing to say that the mindset has changed, but now how do we deal with the fact that he says, no, A sin, after you go through teshuvah, is accounted as a merit. Go ahead.
It's really difficult to spin that. I mean, you really have to do a lot of break your head on this. But the only thing I can think is sort of in certain cases where somebody does something horrible. I'm thinking about our own system of our own, like I guess the penal code, the justice system. Somebody goes to prison, and then they think about it, and then they come out, and then all of a sudden they use whatever that was to sort of right other wrongs in society. For example, Frank Abagnale, he did all this, all of his fraud and counterfeiting and all that stuff. He got sent to prison, and then he got out, and the FBI hired him to go catch other fraud.
Right,
That were
right.
committing fraud.
I like that. I have to say, I was sort of banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out how to make it work, and I think you may have. So let's think about this for a second, right? Which is perhaps you could argue that when you've gone through a process of repentance, that you can actually undo that by helping other people not do it, or helping it not happen with other people. And the example that you gave, for those who are playing along in our home game, right? The example that you gave was, a criminal, a thief who got caught, went to jail, and now comes out and helps the police catch other thieves, or helps an alarm company make better alarms, right? So that people can't get in. Or, we see that in the hacker world all the time, right? There's black hat hackers and white hat hackers, in the big cyber war that's out there. Okay, I like that. Anybody else?
Also a minority. I don't know that most criminals go do the time and come out and make.
No, it's definitely a minority. That is definitely a minority. Mr. Gould. Tell me how. Give me an example. I like what you're saying, but give me an example of how it could be a net positive.
You deliberately trip someone, and then they fall, and so they scrape their knee. But then for teshuva, you go through the entire process of getting first aid, helping the knee, and then helping them get back to a better state than they were before you tripped.
All right, so Micah's arguing here that perhaps during the process of teshuvah, and I think you're saying something similar, you're reframing it, but something similar to what we were saying over here, is that the process of teshuvah can help that person get to a better place than where they were beforehand. You did something to hurt somebody, but through this process of teshuvah, you've helped them, and there's that net gain for them in terms of the whole process. Okay, Marge. So Marge is arguing that maybe the net gain is for the perpetrator, right? Not the victim, in this case. That they've become a better person, and then again, they're putting out better things into the world, right? If they went along in their life of crime, or their evil ways, or they were not such a nice person, and they finally realized how that attitude hurt somebody, and it caused them to actually think about how they're dealing with people in the future. It could be a net gain, and I would actually argue that if we think about teshuvah in the way that Rambam, that Maimonides thinks about it, there has to be a net gain, right? Because Maimonides, his last step of repentance is, you're not truly repentant until you are placed in the same situation, you make a different choice. So that could be, we could argue that's a net gain, right? Because now you're in the same situation again, and instead of doing that sin over again, right? Instead of just trusting everybody and saying, I know that, this is an impossible burger. They told me that. Well, now you're going to check, right? And you won't be in that same place again and again. Okay? Okay? Say it again? Tell me, so it only works if you're altruistic. Why?
The perfect example is the Jewish gentleman who donates $1 million to the synagogue.
Sold.
And he says, I donated anonymously.
Right. So the argument that's being made is it only works if you're altruistic, right? And if you do what you're supposed to do, which, look, teshuvah here, that process has to be a true process, right? You're right. If it's not a true process, then that's between you and God, obviously. We talk a lot about that on high holy days. We can come, we can beat our chests, but really and truly, are you planning on changing? Well, you know whether you are, and God knows whether you are, and that's why we're here on Yom Kippur, right? But so I agree. It only works if you're altruistic. Anybody else? Anybody else can think of how we can conceive of turning a sin into a merit through the process of teshuvah? So let's look at Joseph, right? Let's look at our story now. And I'm going to turn to page 308, 309 in our red, well, I can't say our red books anymore because now they're both red. In the bigger red book, the thicker red book in our Chumash. So this is the end of the story, right? This is the end of the story of Joseph. This is the end of the story of Genesis, right? If you look at the very bottom of the page, it actually says, Joseph and his brothers, the finale, right? Very dramatic that we have there. So this is the end of the story. And if you remember, we spoke last week about Judah, about coming back together again, and about this process of reconciliation and repentance, right? That's what we talked about last week. And Joseph said something last week that he's going to echo again this week, okay? But in a different framework. Verse 15 at the bottom of 308. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, so Jacob had just died, they said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrong that we did him?" So there was this great reconciliation, and everybody was back together again, and Jacob, arrived back in Egypt, and every time I see that in the text, I hear Andrew Lloyd Webber's, choral piece, right? And Jacob came to Egypt, right? I mean, this big finale, right, of everybody coming back together in the great major key, right? Everybody's happy, but it's not so much because the happiness doesn't last, right? And now we've got this problem. So they sent a message to Joseph in verse 16. Before his death, your father left this instruction: "So shall you say to Joseph, forgive, I urge you, the offense and guilt of your brothers who treated you so harshly. Therefore, please forgive the offense of the servants of the God of your father." And Joseph was in tears as they spoke to him. By the way, Dad never said that, at least not in the text, right? So the brothers are saying to him, hey, Dad said this, and they're kind of making it up to give themselves some cover. But what's Joseph's response? We see the tears here as we saw at the beginning last week as well. His brothers went to him themselves, flung themselves before him, and said, "We are prepared to be your slaves." Right? So I see this as an act of teshuvah. Right? They didn't get there quite the best way. They lied a little bit, right? They said Dad said this when Dad didn't really say this, but when push came to shove, they actually appeared before Joseph and said, "We're sorry." But Joseph said to them, "Have no fear. Am I a substitute for God? Besides, although you intended me harm, God intended it for good, so as to bring about the present result, the survival of many people." He said that last time, and he's saying it again. And I want to key in on that verse, because for the Torah to repeat it twice in two different parshiot at two times of the story means this must be really important. So what is Joseph saying here? What is Joseph saying here? And how then can we harmonize this with the second Reish Lakish version?
Well, I think that's what I was trying to say.
Yep,
without saying it
I know.
before. So how do you say this without saying that? So, I mean, first of all, I'm not really sure how authentic this apology is. I mean, they were really just more afraid of anything, and they wanted reassurance that he wasn't going to take any kind of revenge or get back now that, Dad is no longer around. Because the first time Dad's still alive, and then they kind of have that backup, and now Dad's not here anymore, and it's like, oh boy, now, is he really going to take care of us? And here they came down, they're settled in Goshen. They want to make sure that they are going to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
What does everyone really want? Everyone wants to know that they're safe and they're secure. So they're trying to kind of put that together. But in the end, he says, don't worry, there was this whole famine, and it turned out for the good because, well, like we're going to be saving all these lives. And I like that the whole parsha is called Vayechi, and it's the life of, just like Chaye Sarah kind of.
Mhm.
It's about the life, and it's about living, and the meritorious part is that, yes, he forgave them, but that this is a blessing because now they have their 71, they probably have a few more now, they've had some grandchildren, and they can go on to become B'nai Israel.
So the brothers here were looking for that security. They didn't have it yet. They had Dad as their backup sort of beforehand, and it's interesting. A number of rabbis pick up on the fact, going all the way back to Cain, that sibling rivalry. When you look at sibling rivalry all the way through, there's definitely a difference between when the parents are alive and when the parents are not alive. Right? And honestly, I actually see that in my own family. My mother and my uncle don't get along very well, never got along very well. And everybody sort of put a happy face on it until both of my grandparents had passed. And once that happened, things really fell apart quickly. Right? So there's this difference. There's definitely a change between when parents are alive and when parents are not alive in terms of sibling rivalry, in terms of all of that. But we also see really a difference of perspective here, right? For as much as the brothers were so happy of everything that happened, they still carried guilt. They still hadn't moved on. Joseph had, but they hadn't, because the fear of all of this came from them. They created in their own mind, because they were still carrying that guilt. Well, what if he's still angry at us? Well, he's not, because if he would have been, we would have seen it all the way through. But their own guilt, right? And what that says is that they hadn't gone through this process of teshuvah completely yet. They hadn't finished it. They were still dealing with that guilt, working through that guilt, which is what teshuvah helps us to deal with, right? It's not just about getting rid of the sin, so to speak, but it's about putting ourselves right. It's about putting ourselves right. And they hadn't gotten there yet. They weren't right yet. And therefore, Joseph said the same thing again. We're okay. That's how I ended my sermon last week, right? Joseph was saying, we're okay. It's okay. We can move on. Go ahead.
I think the irony of the whole thing is that here they were so annoyed or jealous when he told them his dream that they would be bowing to him in the dream.
Right.
Now the end comes and they're flinging themselves out.
And everything came to full circle, right? The dream came true. The dream came true earlier, and it still is coming true at the end. So it's interesting. I want to finish with this. Rabbi Sachs brings an interesting insight here in terms of how Reish Lakish and our parsha sort of go together. And this is what he says. When Joseph said God intended it, right? He writes, not only is this the source of Reish Lakish's principle, it also enables us to understand what it means. Any act we perform, he writes, has multiple consequences. Some good, some bad. All of the things we do, every choice we make has consequences. Not all of them are 100% good. Every act. When we intend evil, the bad consequences are attributed to us because they are what we sought to achieve. Right? If we say, I am going to, I think Micah was the one who said trip somebody, right? I'm going to intentionally trip somebody, and we do it. Well, we get the bad consequence of that because that was our intention, to trip them. Right? The good consequences are actually not what we sought to do. And therefore, we don't get the consequence. We don't get the plus of the good consequence. And this is his chiddush here, which I really think is brilliant. Our intention was the evil consequences, therefore we reap that reward, so to speak, for the evil. Since our intention wasn't good, our intention wasn't to make this person feel better, the fact, Micah, that you said at the end of all of this he feels better, we don't necessarily get the good consequences for that because that wasn't our intention, possibly. But he's going to say the opposite, right? He says, once the brothers had undergone complete repentance, their original intention was canceled out. And it was now possible to see the good as well as the bad consequences. And I want to think about this because this was, I read this and I sat with it for a couple of hours, really sort of thinking it through. If our intention is evil, bad, I don't want to use the word evil, our intention is negative, right? That negativity, he argues, and Reish Lakish, I guess in this case, argues, sort of outweighs any positive benefits that may come from that. We don't get the benefit of the positive because our intention, our kavanah, was for negative. So the only way to change a sin into a merit, right, to get the positive of whatever good consequences, you're not getting a merit for the sin, but you're getting a merit for any positive consequences that came from it, is teshuvah, to change your intention. And if your intention then changed to good through this process of teshuvah, the consequences then are changed to good as well. And the reason I was thinking about this so much, it's so difficult. It's so difficult to tell people's intentions, right? We deal with a world out there that is hidden behind facades of smiley faces when people don't intend for good, hidden behind avatars and the internet that we don't even know who people are. We don't even know if they're people, by the way. They could even be bots, right, at this point in time, right? We don't know. We don't even know ourselves sometimes. We're so caught up in our own mishugas and our own thing that we don't know. We can't even ascertain truly what our intention is. But when we go through this process of teshuvah, it helps clarify. Because we have to ask ourselves, A, did I really want to do this? Well, yeah, the answer was yes. And B, do I still want to do it? Because if the answer is yes to that, then you're not really doing teshuvah. But if the answer to that is, you know what, I've changed where I am, it's only then that we can start to move past this and start to see the good that may have come out of that, or the good in that person. I think it's a really powerful way of looking at this. And as we end this book of Bereshit that is filled with family dysfunction, right? Our patriarchs were great and they were amazing, but those families were pretty messed up, right? In terms of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all of these things, sacrificing your son and stealing the birthright, and it's better than any soap opera, right? We have to, at the end, this finale is actually the end of all of that. right? We'd followed this dysfunctionality from one generation to the next until we finally got here where Joseph and his brothers are able to say, it's done. We're good. And only then can we move on to become the people that we're going to be, which is next week as we start the book of Shemot. Right? Now we can move from the issues that we had figuring out how to be a family. We still have to figure out how to be a people. And by the way, the book of Shemot, we got lots of issues. Golden calf, just to name a few, right? We've got issues we still need to work out. But we've moved past that first stage, and now we're creating ourselves as a society, as a community, and we can work on that as well. One needs to build on the next. Any comments or questions before we get to our Torah reading for today? Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, then.